I'm Robyne Bowness, and I'm a pulse research scientist with Alberta Agriculture out of Lacombe, Alberta. As far as pulse crops in general, they are a highly nitrogen fixing crop, which means they fix their own nitrogen. So as far as fertilizers and things like that, you have to focus making sure you get lots of phosphorus onto them, but you don't need to worry about too much nitrogen because they will fix their own. They have a symbiotic relationship with the inoculants that we put down with pulse crops, and that's a bacteria, and so the bacteria feeds off the plant, and the plant forms nodules, and these nodules draw nitrogen out of the air that's in the soil. So if you're growing pulses, first of all, you need to make sure you get them in early. I know every crop kind is going to say seed your crop first, but pulse crops do need to go in early, and they can actually tolerate the cool, wet soils in the spring that a lot of crops can't. So even if it's fairly wet, as long as you can get on the land and the soil isn't below zero, 5 degrees is always nice, and it can tolerate it quite well. We do recommend seed treating pulses. They do take a little bit longer because of the seed size. They take a little bit longer to come up, and so they tend to sit in the cool soils a little bit longer, and it just gives the funguses and the fungi and some of the bad things in the soil a chance to kind of get into the seed. So seed treatment is quite important with pulses. They don't particularly like wet feet per se, and what I mean by that is they don't mind kind of like the cool wet soils in the springtime when they're imbibing and emerging and setting them, getting a good plant stand. But if they sit in, like if you have a really wet field that's high clay and they sit in water for any length of time, any more than 3 or 5 days, that's probably not very good. They just don't like to get wet feet. Now the exception to that would be faba beans. Faba beans actually like wetter, cooler soils, and they don't mind the moisture as much as some of the other pulse crops do. But for lentils and peas and chickpeas, they do tend to like it a little bit drier. So pH-wise, we recommend that the soil not be below a pH of 5. 5 for sure, 5.5 is even better. And the reason for that is because it's not necessarily the plants themselves that can't tolerate that lower pH, but it's the inoculant symbiotic relationship that they have with their rhizobia, and that doesn't work very well if you get into lower pHs. Disease control is always an issue with any crop, but with pulse crops as well. There is some root rot diseases that can affect them, so that's why we stress the importance of fungicides in the seed treatments in the spring. And there's some foliar ones as well. So we've got ascochyta that's airborne, and we have some botrytis that is airborne, and some different foliar diseases, stemphillium. There's quite a list. And so we recommend scouting pulse crops on a regular basis, like you would any crop, and keeping on top of the disease pressure. So we do recommend that you try to pick some of your less weedier fields. It's quite easy to control the grasses in the pulse crops, but not so easy to control the broadleafs. There is a bit of a limited availability for some of them. Ones that would be particularly problematic would be the quackgrass is very difficult to kill, which is actually a grassy, but it is very difficult to kill in pulse crops, and thistles. Thistles are a really bad one as far as pulses. So if you've got a field that you've got some thistles in and you're considering putting pulses in the following year, make sure you clean them up in the fall before. Do what you can to control those perennial weeds. Harvestability kind of depends on the year. We get a gain of about, I think it's 1% every single year in our standability. One of the things that we hear about peas especially is that they fall over and they lodge quite badly. But we have, every year we're bringing out some newer varieties, and that is one of the focuses of the breeding companies, is to try to get some more standability in there. So we are making some gains in that area, if you will. So sometimes they can be a little bit kind of tricky to pick up. I mean, lentil crops don't grow very tall. Peas can grow quite tall, but then they have the potential to lodge a little bit. So again, the best thing you can do is, put them in a good field, control the weeds, control the diseases, especially ascochyta in peas. That really causes a lot of lodging. And then if you have a field that has lots of rocks in it, we highly recommend that you roll pretty much all pulse crops. It's a good idea to roll the land and push those rocks down, because lentils, peas, even chickpeas, you tend to be quite low to the ground. Faba beans again would be a bit of an exception to that. Faba beans are a tall crop and they stand very, very well and they won't lodge, so you can go a little bit higher off the ground with faba beans. What to expect for next year? I mean, one of the issues that I talked about is, of course, diseases. With a drier year in 2015, we should have some lower inoculum levels, I think. So some of the inoculum that's living in the soil maybe didn't quite have an advantage this year, so maybe not. Might be a little bit lower, but of course the pathogens that live in the soil are long living and they will stay in the soil for up to 10 years. So if we have a wet year again, then we can expect some disease issues. Other than that, I'm not really sure what to say. I know the acreage in Alberta went up to about 1.5 million for pulse crops this year, and based on the price right now, which is really good in peas, and lentils has a good price right now, so I think there's a lot of interest in the farmers to want to put in some more pulse crops next year, so we'll probably see acreage go up. Peas will likely go up, lentils will most definitely go up, and faba beans we'll have to see. There's some farmers that didn't have a very good taste in their mouth after not having a good year, so we'll just see what happens. But faba beans that have exploded in Alberta from like 5,000 acres to 100,000 acres in only 3 years. But they obviously can't continue on that, on that major growth. And after a year like this, I expect they'll probably level off, maybe even go down a little bit. So.
This video is brought to you by Farms.com.